this is the podcast that we created, which talks about the Civil War, and working with iPods and making the podcast that a couple of our members worked on. I also have the digital movie that was assigned, which basically focuses on how to conduct research. And so I just think being able to be familiarized with different technology has, I guess, helped give me more ideas to bring to the classroom. So I think coming in, I didn't really know that much about technology, but I think just showing what I've done and the work that I've done with technology shows that I'm familiar with what I can do. So I think that's also important. I guess another thing that I think is kind of different was what I did was the coursework, college coursework. This also includes my master's as well as my undergrad. And so I taught World History 1 and World History 2 in my placement. So these are all my units that I taught. And so, for example, this unit is on Asian civilizations. And it basically has, my organizers, my handouts, my PowerPoints, as well as the quiz that I gave. And so for each one of, all my lessons are pretty much here just to refer to in the future, as well as other people within my cohort if they want to take ideas or use them their own. And then also my undergrad research, I think, is also important because it shows that I'm able to do historic research, and I have strong writing skills. So, for example, this talks about the power of the Pope and the King in the Middle Ages fighting over secular power. So I just think showing that I'm able to use these skills in more broader terms than just teaching students. So I think that's also important.
Can you take me to the student growth one, please, Paul?
Yeah.
Okay, so talk through that one.
Okay, so student growth was, I kind of gave an introduction, and the first example I gave was with the writing that students did. And so I basically explained that being able to write in social studies is important. I think students need to be able to take the content that they're learning in social studies and coming up with their own idea, their own decisions. And so a lot of my writing prompts were more persuasive in the sense that they had to either appeal to a president or the League of Nations in trying to use the content but also come up with their own, I guess, viewpoint and idea. So my student growth is in their writing. And what I found, though, in doing this project was that most students either lack the, I guess, structure in making their paper flow, because a lot of my students just kind of threw in facts and dates, and they didn't really make an argument. Also, that some of my students didn't really answer my question. So one of my prompt was appeals to the League of Nations, talking about the rise of dictators. I mean, they could talk about what the League of Nations was, but they also needed to talk about the dictators. And most of my students either focused just on the League of Nations. So I think just getting students to be able to make the connections, to answer the question, and to phrase it in the right way. My last writing, though, in terms of crunch of time, was I had students just bullet the responses that they would give to President Truman about his decision to drop the atomic bomb. And I found that even though it wasn't really like paragraphs or letters per se, I think that it allows students to bullet their main ideas, and if I had more time, then based on what they turned in, this would be turned into a larger paper. So I found that doing webs or brainstorming before they write does help students a whole lot more than just sitting down and writing, because I think most of my students, that's all they did, and that's where the trouble came in. My second thing was with the concept maps, and I had 2 classes, so I was able to do my 5 amongst the 2, but I basically found that after I did the third one or the second one, that most of my students were able to figure out what they were doing and what the purpose of these concept maps were. And I think the most, I guess, beneficial one I did was on the one on genocide, and I know it's a touchy topic, and most students kind of have a hard time, I guess, identifying what a genocide is or what it like different examples. So I just think making a concept map on genocide allowed them to, because I think they were familiar with the Holocaust, but I think they also had a unit in English where they talked about Rwanda and Sudan. And so I just think it was a good basis of what is genocide and what's not genocide, so that when we're referring to it, we can go back and forth of what qualifies it. And I think students were also able to get I guess the concept of genocide, that it could be an ethnicity, religious group, political ambition. So I think my students really did benefit from the concept map.
Can you take me to the standards?
Yeah.
And how's that going?
So the standards, what I did was, I found that some of my standards, though, when I did my NCSS lessons, was that they touched on some aspects, but they didn't really fully get the extent of what it was. And I think, like my NCSS on the Protestant Reformation, I mean, it is culture, but I feel like it's not really culture in that you're understanding different people and ethnicity. And when I planned this lesson, I was thinking more culture on the long lines of that they adapted for their own beliefs or their civilization or survival. So what I found, though, in looking at the NCSS standards, was that it mainly focused on culture and people through time. So one example that I did in my student teaching was when talking about the Mesoamerican civilizations, the Mayans, Aztecs, Incas. After we're teaching them, I created this chart so it can allow students to see the location, the capital, religion, trade, and they're able to put all three together and see the bigger picture. And also what was good about this was that once this was filled out, they were able to see that they were similar in the sense based on location, based on their beliefs. Like they all believed in polytheistic God and had some type of ruler and had some type of education. So I think in that sense, I was able to learn that NCSS themes are a lot more broader than just in their term or what they in their title. Yeah, so basically what I have is I have my NCSS lesson in there as well as the ones that I adapted in my student teaching that meet those standards.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, you talked about the student growth and stuff. How did you assess student growth? Like the ideas that you had were great. Do you have any examples of that? Or
Yeah, how I assessed student growth was I basically used a rubric for one of them and basically just looked to see that they met the standards that I had. And I also, even in the writing prompt, gave them and showed them what I was expecting for them. And then I also gave them comments as well. So after each written assignment, I would give them ways to improve what I'm looking for. And so if I can pull up, so this was the rubric that I used.
right, how well did they do?
I think for the most part, they did. I took up about 4 or 5 points out of 20 for the students that I monitored. The main part that they lost was in answering my question. Like I said, they only focused on one idea, and also they were kind of all over the place in their arguments. And so that's what I suggested in their writing was, to focus on the topic and to answer my question. These are just comments that I made and handed back, as well as in front of the class, just gave them overall, some of you guys, and also in terms of paragraphing, a lot of them just had just one huge paragraph, and that was their paper. So I just kind of gave overarching ideas and suggestions.
You talked about your growth in planning. How about your growth in the classroom? How do you feel like you grew?
Okay,
over
yeah.
the course of the year?
On my in task, when I talk, I think it's reflection number 9. I include the observations I received both fall semester as well as spring. And if you look at them, basically I was kind of stiff, or I showed, I guess, excitement. And part of the reason why was just because, one, I was in the school, and plus the teacher was in there, so I kind of felt like I was, I don't know, intimidated or just fearful of what I was going to say. And so, also, especially in my early field placement, I wasn't creating the lesson, so I was kind of mirror teaching, so I was just kind of going on what my cooperating teacher did. But I think this is my early field placement, this right here, and a lot of it's just saying, show more excitement, take on the class, be more interactive with the students, where in the spring semester, some of it's touched on, but I think